number is that 65% of people who are currently incarcerated will be home within the next 5 years. What type of men and women do you want released to your communities? It's no longer only people going to the inner cities. We're going to rural, suburban America. We're going to everywhere, USA. And do you want people who have been sitting around for 5 years being abused, that have no autonomy and no autonomy whatsoever in our lives? We can't determine what we wear, when and what we eat. We can't determine if we go left or if we go right. Everything is dictated for us. Everything is dictated for us. And then we're released into these communities with exacerbated mental health issues, with exacerbated physical ailments, and we're told to thrive.
Hi, I'm Gabe with the Ghouls Next Door, the media literacy show from a horror lens where we explore the real-life historical and happening right now reasonings behind our cinematic fears. And this month and the month before, we have been doing a series called Haunted, where we have explored haunted people, haunted homes, haunted underwater homes, haunted attractions, and recently, haunted prisons. As part of that specific episode, we thought it would be important to shine some light and bring in some voices that are more knowledgeable on the subject of our incarceration system than just the ghouls. It has always been a goal for the ghouls to invite others to talk on our show and to use our platform to amplify the voices of those who are doing the work for the topics and the themes and the issues that we see discussed on film, and for those who are outright affected by the things that we have seen on screen that are horrifying, and things in the real world that are equally horrifying to what we're seeing on screen. And what we found with our exploration of haunted prisons was how very haunted and horrifying the prison system is. And so it was very important to us to open up the dialogue for discussion from the ground of what people are experiencing and some of the horrible things that are going on there. I know a lot of people aren't as privy to that information. Not everyone is fully aware of the horrors that happen in our incarceration system. And we, in our last week's episode, did share quite a lot of resources and recommendations for films that you can watch, documentaries you can watch, and I very highly, highly recommend that you do that, as well as reading books like Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, and really educating yourself on what is going on. But on today's episode, we will be featuring two special interviews that I did with two amazing individuals who are working in their own way and from their own points of view on the very issues that we're going to be talking about. And so one of my guests is Pam Superville, who's the Deputy Director of the Office of Reentry Partnerships here in Philadelphia. And she works with people re-entering and equipping them with the resources and tools that they need to get back into the world and be able to get on with their lives. And it is not an easy task. Similarly, the other guest I'm talking to is also helping people who are reentering, although his point of view is a little different. So, Tyree Wallace, who is currently incarcerated for a crime he did not commit since 1997. He is the founder of the MANN UP Association, which is a peer support and empowerment group that does work both inside the walls of SCI Phoenix and on the outside to help those preparing for release. He is also a founder of the Pennsylvania Lifers Association branch, and the organization has sponsored a family forum for inmates serving life sentences, has developed a youth awareness group, and has coordinated charitable drives to purchase winter coats and school supplies for needy children and to make donations to the Big Brothers Big Sisters Association and a shelter for victims of domestic violence. And you'll hear in my interview with Tyree that there's no end to the amount of work that he has been doing, even where he is. And so I hope that you learn a lot from both of these folks and how the world is for people who are reentering or are currently incarcerated and the challenges that they're suffering. And I hope that the biggest takeaway is some understanding. It's just meeting them on their level, knowing the struggles that they have to go through and that they are people at the end of the day and that we need to hear them and help them in any way that we can and try to change or disrupt the system that we currently have, which is incredibly harmful. And yeah. So I hope you enjoy this episode of the Ghouls Next Door. Remember to rate and subscribe. Leave us a comment if this is something that you are interested in. If you'd like to see more instances of us talking to folks out there doing the work based on things that we're talking about, we would really love to hear from you. And if you are someone who's doing the work, let us know as well. And there we go.
In the latter half of the 20th century, companies closed down factories in American cities and moved them to places where they could pay workers less. Jobs that allowed people to save for their future were snatched away. America's prohibition on many recreational drugs and the boarding up of factories supercharged the drug economy. Some people took to substance use after being laid off. Others took jobs selling drugs, seeking fast money instead of languishing in low-wage jobs. These illegal economies encourage violence as people try to protect their merchandise and their lives. Add to that a racist war on drugs that has ripped people from our communities, and the misery becomes clearer. But we can end this toxic drug economy and the drug war that feeds mass incarceration. We can decriminalize drugs and create jobs programs. We could have regulated dispensaries and safe consumption sites where people could obtain drugs legally and use them in a safer manner. We could provide social services and addiction counseling. By legalizing drugs, we could cut down on the violence that happens in the drug economy and also cut down on overdose deaths. And by creating jobs programs, offering guaranteed meaningful work that pays livable wages, we could provide an alternative to working on the corner. Where factories stand vacant, people could build low-cost housing and community centers. People who previously sold drugs could work at dispensaries or become peer counselors. As we face the realities of climate change, we could employ people to build community-based agriculture programs and other sustainable solutions. The possibilities for meaningful work which heals our communities is only as limited as our imagination. But how could we fund all this? Well, that's easy. We could tax the rich and also reduce bloated police and prison budgets. There are a lot of rich people who made a killing by creating this problem. We need the political courage to make them fix it.
All right, well, why don't we get started?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Could you first introduce yourself and just tell us a bit about who you are?
Absolutely. First of all, I'm extremely grateful for this opportunity to speak with you all. My name is Tyree Wallace. For the past 25 years, I have been incarcerated in the state of Pennsylvania. A little background on that: I have been incarcerated for a crime in which I had absolutely no involvement. Mm-hmm. I have been, for the past 10 years, represented by the Pennsylvania Innocence Project, who has been working to try to have my name cleared and get me released from prison. I came into contact with the Institute of Community Justice, and the director at the time, her name was Amistad. She is the person who connected me with you all, and here we are.
Yes, awesome. Could you tell us a bit about like your interactions with the Innocence Project, like how that connection was made, and maybe some of like the support that they offer?
Absolutely. So So again, I've been incarcerated for 25 years, and I've been trying to clear my name ever since. So the Innocence Project has a stringent procedure and process before they decide to represent someone. So it took me, at least 10 years of trying to have them represent me, for them to actually to do their investigative process, to check into me, to check into witnesses, et cetera, for them to agree to take my case. So I actually really appreciate the process that they actually have, because when the Innocence Project represents someone, you can be certain that they've done their due diligence, and they have a clear understanding of the case, and that they absolutely believe in their innocence before they put their stamp of approval on someone.
Mm-hmm.
So there's been a mountain of evidence that has come forward that points to my innocence, that proves my innocence from my perspective, and it's still coming out to this day, even 25 years later. So an example of some of that evidence is eyewitness testimony. So there was only one eyewitness. He came forward, said he saw who killed the person, that it was not me, that I was not involved, and not only that one of the corrupt officers in my case tried to make him say that it was me. That's a piece of evidence that came forward. Another piece of evidence that came forward that was kind of like the icing on the cake from my perspective for the Innocence Project was I took and passed a court-qualified polygraph examination. So I had all this evidence. I was looking for help. I was trying to raise money for attorneys. I was doing all these types of things, and I just wasn't receiving the help. So I was like, man, I need something to help put this over the top. And so, I've raised some money through a couple different fundraisers with the help of my late mother at the time, and we raised enough money to be able to hire Michael Martin, who's a nationally renowned polygraph expert, passed the polygraph test. On top of all of the other information that I had, that really interested the Innocence Project, and as a result, they wound up taking my case, and they've been fighting by my side ever since. Some of the resources that they bring along is they bring college students who, reviewed every facet of my case. They've filed appeals and petitions on my behalf. They are currently representing me in the commutation process, which is a little tricky for someone who is innocent of the crime, because the commutation process is not specifically designed for my situation.
Mm-hmm.
However, we are utilizing every possible avenue to get out of prison. They've really been invaluable in a lot of different ways, and I'm grateful and fortunate to have them.
Yeah, that sounds really amazing, and I'm really glad that you were able to connect with them and get these steps forward. Could you tell us a bit about your experiences? So you've been in there for 25 years. I guess could you walk us through maybe some of the issues or maybe even some mental health concerns that you have witnessed or experienced while you were in there?
Absolutely. I again really want to thank your program, your podcast, for being willing to shine a light on this side of mass incarceration.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the reason why I say that is because the media really has a vital role to play in determining the trajectory of this system within our nation. Because many times when you see the media discuss mass incarceration, many times they're holding up our justice system as a paragon of virtue.
Mm-hmm.
And when you hold up a flawed, biased, racist, and sometimes corrupt system up as a paragon of virtue, that narrative perpetuates this cycle of injustice. But it also puts in place barriers and reinforces barriers for those who are seeking justice. Like, to give you a prime example of that, many times when I articulate my or proclaim my innocence, I automatically get a look of everybody in prison is innocent. Right, I got it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is perpetuated in the media. So it's a narrative that's based on a fallacy. Most of the people in prison are not walking around saying that they are innocent of the crime. That is absolutely not true. So it's based on a fallacy, but it's a dangerous fallacy that really, really hurts. Another thing that I've, witnessed, that's based on a narrative that's pushed on the outside, speaking of some of the horrors in prison, one of the things that I think about that's really, really in the forefront of my mind, and it's changed somewhat over the past 5 to 10 years, thankfully, for those who were, victims of this situation, is I look at the narrative of the national joke of sexual violence in prison. I'm not certain if you ever, I'm certain that you had. One of the things that you always hear comedians and shows talk about is that if you get locked up, you better not drop the soap.
Yeah.
Or this is going to happen to you, or that's going to happen to you. And that is a real thing that was taking place in prison. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And especially vulnerable men and women in these places were being sexually assaulted repeatedly, over and over and over again. Youth who were coming and being incarcerated in adult prisons, racial minorities in whatever prison that you're in. So if you're in the middle of the country and you are, of Latino or black descent, the majority of the prison may be white. And most of these other places, the majority of prison are black, and those racial minorities would be attacked. Those media narratives that we push are really, really important because they have real life consequences on women, men, and even children inside of these walls. So I'm really grateful that you all are trying to shine a light on the totality of the picture.
Yeah, I think, one of the biggest things is this with the media and just the way that the narratives that are pushed is this dehumanization and this kind of equating anyone, incarcerated peoples with bad peoples, which is incredibly incorrect. And so I think that helps to push these ideas that we don't have to feel bad when those things happen to those people, because those are not the people that we have been told deserve respect or to be taken care of. And that just further contributes to the issue.
100%. 100%. I could not have said it better myself. I absolutely agree.
Have you, with your time there, interacted with anyone? I don't want you to speak for anyone else's stories, but perhaps just interactions with folks where you have seen the harm that being incarcerated for an extended period of time might have had on a person?
Absolutely, 100%. So you have just my normal everyday experience of being incarcerated, where you could see evidence of these harms all over the place. People deteriorating mentally, physically, spiritually, every day. But then you also have, because, I've created multiple programs, organizations. I actually run a nonprofit as we speak. And as a result of that, I'm involved in the lives of the men that are around me, and within the outside community. So I have a particular and unique insight into some of these issues. So in the institution that I am in right now, SCI Smithville, for some reason, it's a particularly older population here at this institution. So I'm certain that that's like that at a couple of different institutions. So I would think here, I would think at Laurel Highlands, which is like a medical institution, and a couple other institutions like that, you would have a really older population. But you look around and everywhere you see men who are 60, 70, 80 years old, who have been incarcerated for decades, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, no exaggeration, who are literally who could be no harm to anyone. who could be no harm to anyone just because of their age, because of the fact that you age out of criminality. You age out of criminality. Multiple other factors like that, and it's extremely sad. It's extremely sad to see these elderly men here suffering in prison with cancer, with diabetes, with with every ailment that you could think of. And then when you think about, and some people won't care about that. Some people think that these people should be in here suffering for decades, maybe 40 years after they've committed a crime. Some people may think that that's perfectly okay. But if you think about the fact of what that costs the taxpayers, right? So I'm going to quote something here from FAM, which is Families Against Mandatory Minimums, and they say that one person could cost up to $5.7 million. This is 70% of lifers were under the age of 30 at the time of their crime, which means that Pennsylvania taxpayers could be paying to incarcerate them for 50 years or more. An extraordinarily pricey possibility. For example, if someone enters a prison at 20, moves to a skilled or personal care unit at the age of 55 and lives to be 75, the lifetime cost to incarcerate that one person could be approximately $5.7 million plus inflation. So if you don't care about the humanity of the problem, if you don't care about that someone who's 60, 70, 80 years old no longer causes a threat to society, people should really think about what it costs taxpayers to keep these people incarcerated at this time. Yeah. And again, one of the things that really proves that incarceration, that people age out of criminality, is when you think about the low recidivism amongst the juvenile lifers who were let out. So 175 juvenile lifers were let out in Philadelphia who were all originally convicted of homicide. And after 21 months, only 1.1% or 2 people had ever been convicted of any other crime again. Wow. So 1.1% of these people who were sentenced to life were let out. And the numbers are even more impressive when you talk about people's sentences being commuted. So, so to have this knowledge, to see the suffering amongst these men and women, and to keep them incarcerated anyway, truly, from my perspective, is intentional, cruel, and unusual punishment. You know that they're no harm to society. You know that it's harming taxpayers, and yet you keep them incarcerated until they die.
Do you feel like the processes and just the way that the system is set up now is a space that allows for people to... Do you feel like it's set up for people to grow and learn and change, or do you feel like it's really counteractive to that?
Excellent question. It is not set up for rehabilitation. It is absolutely not set up for people to grow, learn, and change. And this is intentional. This is not incompetency. This is an intentional process, and I can give you a multitude of examples of that. So every day, when you look at a prison like this, like this prison here, you have the overwhelming majority of men sitting around on the block all day long doing nothing. Literally doing nothing, getting older, getting worse, and there is a linear connection to a lot of the things that are happening in our communities and what is and what is not taking place in the DOC, and particularly in the PDP, which is the Philadelphia Department of Prisons. There is a linear connection because these places are creating worse people. So you have to think, a lot of the men and women who find themselves incarcerated, they come from damaged communities, they have trauma, they come from violent communities, they are arrested, they go to violent, stagnant, oppressive prisons, sit for 5 or 10 years, develop no skills, then they're released back into those same communities in which they already failed, and now there's restrictions upon them. Now you can't get certain jobs. Now you can't be in certain places. Now you can't live in certain buildings because of what you did in your past and ostensibly paid your debt to society for.
Mm-hmm.
And in these violent communities. Now, again, I want to be clear that people understand who it is that I am as a man. I created an organization called MANN UP, which was not about men going up above women. I want to make sure that that's clear. It was about men living up to their responsibility and taking accountability. So I heard a lot of men complaining about what was going on in their circle or in their neighborhoods. And I'm saying, listen, these types of things are going to happen, but what you need to do is man up. And then what we did was we determined what is a man, because a lot of people just didn't really have a definition of what a man would do in certain circumstances, right? So we determined that. So I just want to be clear that I'm not trying to be this person who says the system. There must be accountability, but there also must be accountability with the system, especially because the system is responsible for creating worse people. And it's intentional. It's happening on a daily basis. People. So I literally was just having a conversation with an officer right before this conversation happened. And we were speaking about some of these exact things. And I was telling the officer that what people need to understand is that I believe that the number is that 65% of people who are currently incarcerated will be home within the next 5 years. What type of men and women do you want released to your communities? It's no longer only people going to the inner cities. We're going to rural, suburban America. We're going to everywhere, USA. And do you want people who have been sitting around for 5 years being abused, that have no autonomy and no autonomy whatsoever in our lives? We can't determine what we wear, when, and what we eat. We can't determine if we go left or if we go right. Everything is dictated for us. Everything is dictated for us. And then we're released into these communities with exacerbated mental health issues, with exacerbated physical ailments, and we're told to thrive. But not only that, then one last thing, then we're circumscribed in these communities. In these communities because they know they don't want you going anywhere else. You have to stay right there where you're at because we don't want you where we're at. You know what I mean? We know that we've created a monster. You stay right there, right where it is that you're at, and we're not going to let you work. We're not going to let you do these types of things. And there's this incentive to be able to come back to prison. Prisons are incentivized. Like when you take into an account the difference between state-run prisons and private-run prisons, especially private-run prisons. So I think it's the CCCA, which is the Corporation of America, this entity that pushes private prisons across our nation. When you think about the fact that they hand out twice as many infractions in a private prison than they do in state-run government prisons. Why do they do this? It's because there's a financial incentive to lock people up. They have capacity quotas that they have to meet and standards that they have to consistently meet. I'm sorry if I'm going all over the place.
No, I appreciate it.
Sorry I'm going all over the place a little bit. It's something that I'm obviously a little passionate about. Am I answering your question? Could you please repeat what is it that what was your question again? I want to make sure I'm answering your question.
Yeah, no, you've absolutely been answering the question because it really is this, while you're there, you're not given tools or the ability to better yourself, improve yourself, or any of that, because there's this expectation that there's never an end to it. Like you don't get out. Even when you get out, there's all of these systems in place that make it essentially hard for you to move forward and have that rehabilitation. Some of that's even just like the lack of technology, like access to technology and how it's always evolving. I'm sure that that's its own set of challenges for folks who first come out. And that compiled on top of what you were saying with the mental health issues, the physical issues, they just get compounded because there's nothing in there with the expectation that you are going to be a full human when you come out.
Yes. very well said. Like, just think about the fact that I've never held a cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
The only time that I've seen one on television. I've never held a cell phone. So just think about that. Like,
Yeah.
think about how basic technology and how essential a cell phone is in everyday life for those on the other side of the wall. I've never held one. And so we had this program that we were running here at the institution, and part of what we were trying to do was to get a mock cell phone here in the institution so that the guys who were on their way out, they could, learn how to use a cell phone. Now, this cell phone would have been held by a staff member. It would have never been in the hands of prisoners, but it was so these guys could be prepared to be able to utilize the cell phone. They denied it to happen. Now, mind you, every time you turn around, one of these officers are being walked out for bringing one in and selling one. That's beside the point. That's beside the point. But when we want to utilize it for this positive endeavor to help people prepare for the outside, because I can't tell you how many people I'm in contact with who were formerly incarcerated, who they have so much trouble just operating their iPhone. They don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
They don't know how to do it.
Yeah, and that just creates a further gap for like job opportunities, or just like, being able to access that technological world is so imperative now that I can't imagine that hurdle.
Absolutely. One thing I wanted to say, because when I found out just a couple hours ago now, what it was your podcast was about, that's about the horror films, correct?
Yes.
Listen, it really struck me, because I wanted to go back and put some thought into some of the things that I would say here, obviously, that there really are a multitude of similarities between the horror genre and this system of mass incarceration. Because I was just thinking about that dynamic, and I'm like, there really are some serious similarities there. All right, so with my, limited understanding of just being a fan of the horror genre, obviously haven't created anything in that space, there's normally a predatory person, group, entity, or system that is preying on the vulnerable in some capacity. That is, again, from just my limited, interaction of watching Saw and Friday the 13th, and those type of movies. And when you talk about mass incarceration, that is the business model of mass incarceration. It is the absolute business model. Our nation really needs to be cognizant of the fact that you cannot just take away 365 years of intolerance and state-sanctioned violence and racism and terrorism and remove it in just the subsequent 57 years.
Yeah.
It takes an intentional movement and systemic change to remove all of that out of what's happening. It is this system preying on the vulnerable, on impoverished communities, on communities of color, and more frequently, it's intentionally and specifically preying on women. And that is something that is not often uplifted or highlighted, but it is absolutely what is happening. I'm sorry, I'm going all over the place.
I mean, there's a lot to cover. So, it's...
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there's so many different levels and experiences, and they get compounded, so, there's gender issues, there are differently abled issues, there's race issues, like all of those things just build up personally. And it is worth mentioning. It is worth looking into, because I think the way that we portray certain incarcerated peoples does change based on some of these like identifying factors. And so, two people can commit similar crimes or be incarcerated for similar issues, but because they exist in these two different boxes, entirely different procedures happen, right? Or the way that they're shown in the media can be completely different because they're two different races.
100%. That is very well said. You said it concisely. So yes, absolutely.
Yes. And I want to thank you for talking about the horror aspect, because a big part of what we have been, we've been doing this show for about 6 years now. And a big part of why we have stuck really close to the horror genre specifically is that we feel like it has done this, like a decent job of experiencing and showing certain societal traumas on screen in this way that's digestible for an audience, in a way that people can look and be entertained, but also feel like, wait a second, like, yeah, we can watch zombie movies and the fear of a virus is terrifying, and we know that really well now, but there's also this whole idea of like conformity and, loss of identity and consumerism that piles up in that as well. So I think it's like an amazing space for that. And what we found is actually when we're talking about how media is not representing these things properly, is that we actually haven't found any horror movies about the prison system. And we are really curious as to why that could be, because there's so many different stories we could be telling for that and amplifying those stories. So I wonder why we're kind of only siloing those stories to documentary forms.
I think that's an excellent point. I know that I will start writing immediately.
Yes.
See if I can, occupy that space a little bit, because you're right. And there's so many, like, so you think about it, like, so you find horror movies now trying to find new twists on the same thing. Like you said, zombies and, vampires and all this type of stuff. That whole prison space is a whole unoccupied space. I could not agree more. And one other thing that I would really like to point out when it talks about the horrors of prison, I'm currently a hospice volunteer here at the institution. So while it's absolutely one of the most rewarding things that I do personally, the horrors of it,
mm-hmm.
they are really, it really, really, really is a lot. So, I actually started posting about some of my experiences there. And so people not being able to die with dignity
mm-hmm.
is really a lot. It really, really genuinely is a lot. People not being able to die, not being in pain.
Yeah.
Is a lot. People, the lack of, now I never want to castigate any group, any entire group. So you do have some staff here who are decent people and go out of their way to help.
Mm-hmm.
Just unfortunately, it is just a small minority, though. The overwhelming majority could not care less about the people, because they're prisoners and they're in here. They just couldn't care less about their well-being.
Mm-hmm.
So you have extreme examples of people wind up getting sepsis because they're not getting the treatment that they're needing.
So just to wrap up, because I want to make sure that we leave space for this specific question. Whenever, we're interviewing folks, we always want to leave space for the question of what are ways that one of our listeners or viewers could do to help. So what are some tools? What are some things that they should know about that they can go and do now? They can be active in this to support you, to support other incarcerated individuals, and try to fix this system.
Excellent. First of all, thank you again for this opportunity to speak. Thank you specifically for this question, because action steps are really what it's all about.
Mm-hmm.
To speak about my personal situation, one of the things that they could absolutely do, so in the next month or so, going to be unveiling some more evidence of my innocence. I think that this is going to be the most powerful piece as of yet. So I would like people to be aware of that and to support it. There's a website, it's free, Tyree Wallace, and it's Tyree, Wallace, Wallace, freetyreewallace.com.
Okay.
Have have a petition that's being circulated. Once we get to 10,000 signatures, and we're somewhere right around 9,000 now. Once we get to about 10,000 signatures, we're going to take some action steps to try to secure my release. So that's how I could be helped personally going there. And one final step for my personal situation, my nonprofit, SRC, which stands for Systemic Reformative Change, I would love for people to go there and check that site out. And you can do that by going to spell R out, WEARE, SRC.org. That would help there. Now, in general, to help, I just would like people to keep an open mind and to understand that criminality is not innate to any group of people. And if that fact is true, if we can accept that fact that that women are not innate to crime, that black people are not innate to crime, that impoverished people are not that this is not an innate thing, that there are circumstances that are having people make choices that they should not make, then we should focus on the root problem. What is the root cause of this? And let's work on solving those problems. And there's about to be a push in Pennsylvania to overturn what's called felony murder. And I'm asking everybody to please understand what felony murder is, why it's wrong, why it's a horrific law that needs to be overturned. As a result of the felony murder law, in Pennsylvania alone, you have over 500 women and men who are sentenced to life without the possibility of parole for murder, yet they have never even been accused of killing anyone. So felony murder, the law, please do research on the felony murder law. Learn what it is. You could learn a lot about the felony murder law by visiting the FAM's website, Families Against Mandatory Minimums. They have a lot of information on felony murder law, what it is. John Fetterman, he's an advocate for abolishing felony murder, and support any measures that's going to overturn this law that have people incarcerated for murder and sentenced to die in prison, even though everyone involved in the case knows that they've never killed anyone. So those are a couple of things that I can think of off the top of my head.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, thank you so much for your time. I'm greatly appreciative for this opportunity. Thank you for what you're doing.
Yes, and thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you being open with me and talking about these issues. And I've learned a lot myself, and I hope that this episode really helps to shine some light on the issues in our justice system so that we can start making some real changes.
Excellent.
What if we reduced the police budget and hired people who have street credibility to go in and interrupt the cycle of violence? We've seen the outcome of street violence both in terms of loss of life and in terms of decades spent in prison. There are a lot of people who were part of the game and part of street violence who've spent decades in prisons turning their lives around, including a lot of people sentenced to life without parole who are currently set to die in prison because they killed someone in retaliation for the death of a family member or a friend, for example. What if we created a fully funded, professionally run program with these returning citizens and others who were formerly part of the drug economy to intervene when a shooting happens? We could be credible messengers. We could be a positive strike force who keep an ongoing presence in neighborhoods across the city. When a shooting happens, we could reach out to people directly impacted and try to dissuade people from retaliation. Preventing violence is a full-time job. In addition to responding directly to crises, we could run education programs for the youth, serve as street counselors, and connect people to resources to remedy problems in their lives. We could help the kid work in the corner prevent his grandma's foreclosure by connecting her to housing counselors. Maybe that could help him get out of the game. We could connect people who are trying to overcome addiction with drug treatment resources. And maybe our work could go beyond just stemming the tide. Our neighborhoods need healing. Maybe we could also be trained to facilitate neighborhood-based restorative justice programs where we could create some healing or at least help settle old beefs so they don't flare up again. We can stop the violence if we use our imagination and creativity, but that won't be enough. We'll need to fuel that imagination and creativity with resources. We'll need to divert money spent on policing to fund things that truly keep us safe. We might hear that these ideas are too lofty, utopian, or even expensive. But nothing we imagine, no matter how outlandish, can possibly hold any less promise or be any more costly than the way we've been going about things so far.
So welcome, Pam Superville, to the Ghouls Next Door. It is a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Excellent. Could you tell our viewers a bit about what you do, the work that you do, and what your position is?
Okay. The work I do, work with justice-involved men and women, boys and girls who are coming home from prison. My title is Deputy Director for the Office of Reentry Partnerships. We are the city's reentry organization. So in my current role, I supervise case managers, social workers, intake staff. We're getting ready to expand back into instructors, anyone that works with helping men and women to successfully reintegrate in the Office of Reentry Partnerships. But I'm going to also say, because I've started, from the trenches, I'm also a trench worker. So I don't just oversee programs, I coordinate programs, but I'm also, the best part of my life is going out and helping the clients that we serve.
Awesome. Could you give us some examples of what people who are re-entering, like some of the issues or support that they need addressed to help them?
Immediately, most people coming home, they will tell you they need a job and they need housing. But what we find out in our day-to-day life, people coming home sometimes need IDs. They get arrested, the cops take their wallets, they have no IDs. If you don't have an ID, you cannot enter a building, you cannot do anything that makes sense. Most people, they need connection to their benefits, food stamps, getting their health benefits together. Some people, they need clothing. So depending on where they spent their time, like we work with people that come from the county prison on State Road, which is known as the Philadelphia Department of Prisons. But we also work with people coming from upstate, and we also work with people coming from the federal prisons. We work with men and women. And sometimes we see the needs of the men being different from those of the women. Like women coming into our office, how can I connect with DHS, and how can I connect with a legal firm to try to reconnect with my kids that I lost during my incarceration, where like most of the men are saying, how can I connect to a job and how can I connect to work? But we see, everyone that comes in our doors every day, they need different things. Some people need training. Some people coming asking, I need to connect to where I can, a place where I can get my GED. Some people need a combination of things. So, but we're here, some people need behavioral health support. Some people are saying, I did have a drug issue before I got incarcerated. I need to be connected with a substance use disorder organization before I fall back on that pathway. So it's different needs of, people based on their incarceration experience, and everybody has, sometimes different needs. So what I usually say with regards that re-entry is not cookie cutter. So, Pam is not going to need the same thing that Angela needs, that Michael needs. Everybody comes in, has a different need, but we try to meet them where their needs are. Some people come in because we offer vocational training. We offer a forklift certification program. And people come in saying, that's what I want. I heard while I was locked up that you guys could help me to get this certification. I have my ID, I have everything, family support. Could you help me connect to vocational training? So it's different, different types of services that we're here to offer people based on what, the requests are.
And they're, kind of just getting dropped into the middle of life and forced to have to pick up and start running where they are. So
Exactly.
it really is who do you have in your corner already and what support do you need to move forward?
And that's why we're getting ready now that it's post-COVID, we're getting ready to go back behind the walls to start letting people know who we are, where we are located, because it's amazing. Sometimes we send information into the prisons to the social workers, Does that information always get to the individuals? No, it don't. So we ask, we have good relationships with most of the jails and the prisons. So we're actually getting ready to go back in, share information, share business cards, share flyers. So when you come out, because they give you 2 tokens, well, back in the day, it used to be 2 tokens. They might give you a SEPTA pass. If they do that, for the people leaving State Road, when you get out, you can come down to us. We will help you with transportation. We will help you with clothing. We're trying to help people to get telephones. That's a new project that we're working on, because how do you communicate if you don't have a telephone? So rather than just being lost and not know where to go, we get letters from people leaving the 26 state prisons, and we have an intake person that would respond to them and say, when you come home, come on down. We'll be here to help you, even though all you had was your transportation and the clothes on your back. So we meet people where they're at and try to help them successfully reintegrate.
During the pandemic, what challenges has that brought upon you and a part of the incarcerated peoples as well?
During the pandemic, what we did when we realized that the prison started releasing a lot of people. So one of my case managers and I were assigned to reach out. We got the lists, the addresses, and the phone numbers or any contact information of the people that we were being released. And during the 2 years of the pandemic, we made over probably 6,000 phone calls to people that were released, letting them know that we're here. Could we help you? What services do you need? And connecting them, giving them the phone numbers and connecting them to the resources that they would have needed at that particular time. One of the successful things that the Office of Reentry Partnerships did during COVID, and we're very proud of it. All the people leaving the county prison on State Road, we offer them a $500 COVID payment, no strings attached. As long as you were released during COVID and we had your information that you were released from State Road, because of our partnerships, we had their names and contact information, we were able to offer 1,200 people a $500 COVID payment. Wow. And that was so well received. And we wish we had more money to even help more people.
Yeah, I think something that I found during the pandemic is there has been this acknowledgement that we have the tools and resources to do this extra bit of help. There's, more focus on accessibility in some of our spaces and things like that. Like, we've been forced to have to rethink the processes and the way that we help or show or just exist in the world. And so I really hope that, like me personally, that we will continue some of those trends or be able to see the value in that, even as things get to quote unquote back to normal. So that's really amazing. I'm so glad that you were able to do that for those folks who were otherwise going to be completely disconnected.
And then family, just getting the phone call because, they tap you on your shoulder and say, oh, you're going to be released today. But a lot of times when, the information we had there, when you get locked up, you give your family's phone number or who your most, your closest relative is. And families and even individuals who were released, they were very, very grateful that sometimes by the time they got home, their families had already told them, well, this organization called ORP has reached out and they said, if you need connections with your benefits or if you need to connect with your PO or because, no movement was happening. So how do I connect? How do we do these things? But we had already been a little bit preemptive in saying, this is the number that you call. This is how you connect to your PO. If you need clothing or whatever, we could send you to a place where you can get some clothing. There were food banks. A lot of people were saying we have no food. We were able to give them on a daily basis. You can go to this Broad Street Ministries on a Tuesday, or you can go to this other church on a Thursday where you can get boxes of food for abundance and give them the addresses. We were able to, even if you can get to our office, we were not here. Sometimes we come in one day a week. We will give you some transportation. So whatever the needs that COVID had placed on people coming home from prison, we were here to help address it.
That's amazing. I kind of want to do like a step back on the just our systems in place now. So I kind of have like this twofold question. And one is what are some of the challenges that folks find themselves in when they're returning because of where they were? So like, are there resources and access and ways to does the system support growth and change and for them to be able to um, come back and be equipped, or do you feel like in a lot of ways it is restricting them or not in any way helping?
Okay, the system doesn't help anything.
Hmm.
Organizations like ours, we have to help. So, I mean, because there are so much, there's so much lack of information, and for the, just don't want to say ignorance or lack of empathy or
Hmm.
for justice involved individuals that sometimes even relatives make it difficult for their loved ones returning home. So this is why I'm grateful for the work that I'm a justice involved individual. I've been home for like 16, 18 years, came home with nothing. And I thank God, that I'm able to now say I'm deputy director for the Office of Reentry Partnerships. I have lived
Hmm.
experience. So I'm able to relate to the needs of people coming home. Some of the things that we see barriers, like I said, because of prejudice, employment, for example, that's a big
Hmm.
need. And we still have to work very diligently with employers saying the fact that they broke the law doesn't mean that they do not deserve a chance to get a decent job.
Yes.
There is facts, there's the reality. If the job for which you're applying relates to your crime, we would not recommend you for that job, sir. So if somebody, for example, was a bank teller, we would not send them back to work even at McDonald's as a cashier. But if they had a small drug offense and they're trying to get a job as a janitor in a hospital, why would you deprive them of getting a
Hmm.
job? So education across the board is very important. Family members do not understand that when their loved ones come home because they've been in a steel cage for depending on the length of their incarceration. If you've gone upstate, you've spent more than 2 years incarcerated. So you can spend anywhere from 2 years to 10 to 20 years. We work with juvenile lifers who spent most of their life in jail. So families sometimes do not realize, okay, they're home, you're happy that they're home, but you got to understand that they got to be deprogrammed into understanding. Now we have SEPTA key passes. When they left, we were
Hmm.
dropping tokens. They gotta understand that they don't know how to use a cell phone. They have no digital literacy skills. When you try to get a job, you're reading, we're hiring for cleaners, but you gotta upload your resume and you gotta do this online application and you gotta do this. Men and women coming home from prison, depending on the length of incarceration, they don't know how to do this. They want to readjust. They want to get back into work situations. But organizations like us, we have to identify these are their needs. So now we're
Hmm.
getting ready to hold some digital literacy classes. We're helping people with mock interviews. We're helping them prepare to even understand the SEPTA system. So it's a lot of things that people coming home, the services that they need, the system doesn't know it. Family members don't know it. So organizations like ours, we are versed in reentry and the needs of justice involved individuals. Something that we're really pushing for across the board is more trauma informed services. What is
Hmm.
trauma? Most people that have been incarcerated, especially our females, have been traumatized. Domestic abuse, violence, drug and alcohol. So many things have resulted in them being incarcerated. You go to prison, there are not many trauma informed trainings or programs. They lock you in a cell and you go through the process. It might be a 5 year sentence. When you come back,
Hmm.
that trauma has been tripled because now you've gone through the trauma of incarceration. Jails where most of the COs are men. So we talk about this all the time with women on state road, wherever. When as a female you have your period in the middle of the night, you have to go ask a male CEO who can't even relate to what you're saying to get you a pad, and sometimes they don't give it to you. These are the kinds of experiences that our women face, and we have men facing similar. So the trauma that people come home it is increased. So first we got to offer them some trauma informed services, deprogram, breathe out. Yes, you want to go get a job, but unless we're able to help you unravel all that stuff that's in your head, let's talk about what made you go to jail in the first place, whether it be a male or female. We're not doing you any good. So these are some of the things that we as a reentry service organization know that is needed. And these are some of the things that we're currently putting in place: restorative justice, trauma informed services, helping you with the basic workforce readiness instructions that you need. How do you
Hmm.
confidently talk about your criminal record at an interview? Why aren't you getting a job? They came home, they're lazy. It's not that they come home and they're lazy, it's the fact that no one is holding your hands and helping them to overcome the barriers of incarceration. So, like I said, the system doesn't know it, we know it, and we try to put all the steps in place to help people successfully reintegrate.
Yeah, I mean, it could be incredibly overwhelming. There's just
Very
so
much,
many
very much so.
issues that just stack upon each other, and if you don't have someone like supporting you or just helping you navigate, it's so easy to get lost. And then on top of that, you mentioned this before as well, it's just like this stigma that is tied to recently
Exactly.
incarcerated people, is that it allows them to be treated terribly in the system, out of the system, even before the system, that could continually fuels it, so that you just end up right back in.
Exactly.
And what are some things that you wish people knew about people who are reentering, or people who are currently incarcerated who might not be able to, be out in our lifetime, their lifetime, those kinds of things? Like, what is something that you wish people knew and understood, um, by others?
Most of the time, what there is, it's a statement, but it's fact. 90% of the times there is no rehabilitation during incarceration. So you're locked in a cell. And the conditions in the different types of jails are really, really harsh. Yes, we've broken the law, but we are still human beings. And 90%, a lot of the people, and I mean, I know you're probably hearing about what's going on in State Road, but it's also happening upstate. Since COVID, families, some of the state jails, we have people like my son is incarcerated. He's 8 hours away. I've not seen my son since 2019 because at first, because of COVID, the jails weren't allowing people to come into state prisons. And now they're even limiting the number of people that can go in to visit. So it's a lot of times that when they lock you away, they put you away so far that the stressors of incarceration really sometimes break people down mentally. A lot of people don't understand this. They think, oh, and then not everybody, here's something that's a fact because we're seeing this more and more. Not everybody that's been found guilty of a crime is guilty of a crime. So then you have that double jeopardy also. People who are incarcerated, sometimes, again, they break the law because of situations, because of trauma, because of whatever. But that does not mean to say that that person is not a human being and that person does not deserve a second chance. People sometimes, like I'm on the board of the Prison Society. I'm on one of the advisory boards, and we're hearing right now up in the state prisons, in addition to them not opening the doors to allow more family members to visit, where they have loved ones locked up my son is locked up 8 hours a week. If I have to go see my son right now in SCI Albion, we have to leave Philadelphia at 1:00 in the morning and drive for 8 hours to get to that prison. And there's no public transportation that goes there. But the other point is when with incarcerated, with our incarcerated loved ones, we're hearing that those who are able to get jobs in the state prisons, the cost of commissary has gone up, say, like 30%. But have they increased the salaries at the 19 cents an hour salaries that they're paying the inmates? No, they're not. So it's a lot. I mean, and my son tells me the food is the quality of food is really decreasing. They want to charge them, if you get sick while you're in jail, they want to charge you a $5 copay. You don't have money. So it's a lot of things that goes on behind the walls that a lot of individuals on the outside, even family members, are not aware of. If you can't support your family financially, what you think happens? They just wallow away. And, a strong person that broke the law, whether justified or unjustified, they could become so mentally deranged by the time at the end of their sentence. When they come home, families can't even understand what has happened to them. So we got to just, push for our legislators to be more aware of what's going on in the county jails and in the state jails, to make sure that they're doing regular checks and making sure that inmates are not treated as animals, even though they're classified as people that broke the law, to make sure that there are laws in place, that they get the health benefits that they need, that they get the meals that they need, that, families of incarcerated loved ones have accessibility to seeing their loved ones. If you don't have money to make phone calls, you can't reach out to your family. So it's a lot of stuff that people, the public needs to be made aware of. And like I said, when they do come home, know that it's going to take them a while to readjust into society. Know that, talking buses and cell phones and ATMs, these people are not used to these things. So we got to actually understand when we say, okay, so they're hiring down at the Lincoln Center, they're looking for cleaners, and you tell your loved one, they don't even know how to navigate. When you go underground, we right here at Sunny City, when you go underground for the trains, you get lost, you turn around because you've been lost. It's simple things like this. We've had clients, we've gave them maps, instructions, transportation. Okay, you go to, as much detail as we can. And when the next thing you know, they're back at our doors. I got lost. And then no one wants to help us. So I had to ask a cop or somebody to bring me back to this office because I didn't know how to get to this job fair. So it's basic things that we tend to take for granted that men and women coming home go through. And, the education, I do education to family members and to community people all the time about, it's like moving into a new area. You went to sleep last night in America and tomorrow morning you woke up in China. That's the experience of some of the men and women, depending, if they just didn't do 6 months on state road, but they spent 10 years upstate or 20 years in a federal prison across the country. That's how it is for incarcerated men and women coming home. So we need to be more empathetic. We need to be more sympathetic, understand that the trauma that they've suffered, they're still dealing with it, and they need our support to help them kind of thaw out and deprogram themselves from that. More programs like ours are needed. Funding, they're always taking away funding from the government for reentry services are always being reduced. So it makes it even more limited for us to offer more services to more people, to pay proficient staff, culturally competent staff to work with the population, because not everybody is culturally competent as a supervisor to work with the population that we serve. Some people are scared of them. Some people come to us because, I have the degree in social work, but they really don't like to work with justice. So it's all that type of stuff. So it makes it really, really difficult on all hands. We have to work much harder and much longer because we're dedicated to helping people doing the work.
And I think there's just work that needs to be done for folks out here to just get on that level and of that understanding of the challenges, and to understand that like this is such a damaging thing mentally, right? Like there's being in there in that enclosed space, it affects just like the way that your brain understands information. So of course they're going to get lost. You've been in this square, your brain hasn't been using the muscles that it's been using to navigate the world. And there's, like you were saying with the trauma, like these things get so compounded, it really takes patience, understanding, and just like you were saying, empathy to meet them where they're at and understand that it's going to take time.
And I have a problem sometimes with some of the movies where they depict men and women, incarcerated men and women, like Orange is the New Black and all these movies. More power to the people who got the jobs and whatever. But sometimes people look at these movies as the template of the reality, and that is so wrong. They really do not depict the hardships of what men and women really, they try to throw a little sex in here and a little violence in here, that type of stuff. But the reality of it, that's not what it is. Sometimes you get locked down for 2-3 days because something happened on another block that you know totally nothing about. You don't get a chance to take a shower. Sometimes, so it's all these basic human needs that you are deprived of as a justice involved individual, that sometimes even our own you're so broken sometimes that when you get a 15-minute call to your loved ones after not talking to them for 2 weeks, you can't even express to them. You're so happy to hear their voices. You put away the hurt and the pain for the 15 minutes and you go through the emotion, and they're not even aware that you're broken, you're suffering. You go back to your cell and you're crying. They weren't able to send you money. You have no commissary. They're serving you slop. It's just a lot. Sometimes you don't have a TV, you don't have anything. But people don't realize, well, lock them up and throw away the key.
Yeah.
And that mentality is not really helpful for justice involved individuals. Like I'm saying, yes, there are people who do horrendous things and things like that, but on an overall basis, everybody deserves a second chance. And
absolutely.
like I said, we don't have a heaven or hell to put people in when they come home after they've done their time and they're trying to reintegrate. Let's be empathetic to them. Let's be sympathetic. Let's have a conversation with them, and not just, oh, that prisoner just came home from jail. He was locked up for 10 years and on a murder. And I mean, like I said, even with employers, going back to that, because if our employers are not willing to give opportunities, even the city of Philadelphia, give opportunities to justice-involved individuals, you opening the door for them to go back to their own ways, whether they want to or not. And then you have family members, baby mama saying, well, I took care of the kids for the last 10 years. You got to go out and get a job. But if he doesn't have a resume, if he doesn't know how to interview, if he doesn't know how to get from one part of the city to the other, if he doesn't have strong family support, how is he going to get that job? So when I do support groups for loved ones of incarcerated people, these are the kinds of things. You've got to have patience and understanding with them. Sometimes they get a PO who is not, very mean to them. Again, not supporting them, but if they only spit on the sidewalk, they have a chance of going back into jail. Even some of this, the professionals that are supposed to be supporting them don't. So we just got to understand this and be very, very empathetic to the clients that are coming in.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's an effect on your body, mind, and soul. Like
Exactly.
every place that you every
Exactly.
part of them is harmed.
Yeah.
And the system is cruel and unusual. It really is. And there's no part of it that is rehabilitating. There's no part of it that is
No.
kind or understanding. And it's really, we're just pocketing people away. They're not people to the society anymore. Like, we could just put this label on them, and that only continues the harm. And then you step away from that, and you even look at the bigger picture, and you think about who is most likely to be incarcerated.
Right.
How are they getting there, right? Like, what resources are we missing in our communities that end up harming them and putting them in that space in the first place?
And I mean, we're looking at the substance use disorder that is ravaging our city and ravaging the country. And when you look at the research, there's been research over years. I was looking at some of this stuff before I got on. Going back all the way to 2009, they were talking about substance use disorder in men and women, but more women, in addition to the trauma of domestic abuse and prostitution and all that type of stuff. Substance use is also a major issue, because that's how a lot of people self-medicate, because nobody really knows of the stuff that they're going through in their day-to-day life. So that's a major issue, and society is not paying attention to these things. And then you have Big Pharma creating all these new drugs. You don't have to smoke weed and smell smelly. You can go take a pill, and before you know it, you're addicted and you're falling by the wayside, and you're up at K&A, and nobody really see how quickly that spiral has occurred. So a lot of the men, the numbers, we were just hearing even on PDP that the numbers of women is increasing, because a lot of sisters are going through a lot of trauma out here in the street. Can't get jobs. Too many men are locked away. It's a lot, and they're reverting to, sometimes it's prescribed drugs. It starts off like that, and then it ends up being into whatever you can buy on the streets. And before you know it, they're in jail, and that revolving door keeps going. So that's a whole other conversation with the substance use disorder, tied into behavioral health issues, tied into the trauma, tied into mental health. A lot of the men and women that are coming out of the prisons right now have a combination of all of those things, or at least one of those health issues, not physical.
Yeah.
Society's not even thinking about it. We're not talking about it. We just keep creating all these drugs, and not really seeing the effect that it's having without proper control on our men and women in our neighborhoods.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk, specifically even here in Philadelphia, of looking and trying to have more law enforcement, or to have these reactive approaches, instead of looking at where is the core, where are these issues stemming from, what are the issues that we need to address that could, over time, it will take longer, right? It's not this band-aid issue that we could just hit into submission. These are structural, systemic problems that are just going to continue to seep and infect this entire community unless we address those issues right there at the core. And I agree that it's not being talked about as much, or in a way that feels positive, like people are going to understand that.
No. Like I said, the question is where Big Pharma should be held responsible.
I agree.
It's not like back in the day where people, okay, you smoke weed or you smoke cocaine. They're telling us heroin is not even the drug of choice now. It's all these pharmaceuticals. pressed pills and all of this. They say fentanyl coming in from Mexico. I mean, who is controlling, the receipt of all so it has to come through somebody's port or somebody's gateway, somebody's airport, who's controlling,
Mm-hmm.
the influx, where these things are coming from. Who's guarding the guard, like the song says.
Yeah.
But nobody's paying attention. And then it's filtering down into communities. It's just like the guns. Where the guns coming from, So it's like I said, people who are supposed to be responsible for oversight are not doing their jobs. And then all the trickle down effect is affecting our communities and health. Hence we have the violence. And then you lock them up and you throw away the key. You're closing down schools. You're taking away, like we had a presentation about a year ago with some kids who had the potential of being locked up for serious crimes. And the little girl was saying, she said, right now, it's easier for me to buy a gun than for me to buy a pair of Jordans. She said, they've closed down the parks. We can't go to the library. We can't go to the pools. And then when we go down on South Street, she said, if people behind me start running, I start running too. And the next thing you know, I'm locked up and I'm locked up that I have a gun. So it's so many different societal issues that are affecting our communities that we as voters and members of the community and upstanding, because everybody wants to turn their head the other way and not really talk about the hard issues that are currently raising its ugly head in our communities. Where are the kids supposed to go? Schools are closing, libraries are closing. Men and women, I mean, more men are locked up than ever before. Their mothers are, so it's a lot of issues. It's a lot of issues. And we just gotta. And then when you talk to them, eventually, some of them have been traumatized from the cradle. Some of these kids have been traumatized from the cradle. Don't know love, never had anybody to ever nurture them. Their grandmothers brought them up. So it's a lot of different issues that are really contributing to the end results of the violence and the substance use disorder that we're currently seeing in the city.
Yeah. It didn't happen overnight,
No,
right? Like, this is generations, and this has been happening, and we are at this point, I feel, where it is really coming to a head, and we have to address it. And so one of the biggest things about our show that we try to implement whenever we do interviews, and even just when we cover heavy topics like this, where you can feel so overwhelmed by the situation and you feel like, well, what can I do? Right? I'm not in there. I'm not one of these tools to help, but what are some things that people who are listening to this show that you suggest they could do to help alleviate some of the stressors, or to support people who are reentering?
I mean, if you are aware of someone that has come home, try to have a conversation with that person rather than judge them. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I don't want to go. I'm faith-based and I go to church and we do a lot of stuff with people coming home. But I'm saying a lot of times, I think ignorance of the situation is no excuse for just dissing people. Trying to be more aware of your environment and trying to like I said, if you are a voter, talking to your politicians about what's going on, trying to understand the core reasons for the situation rather than just let social media and the news and what's out there affect your judgment calls. If you are an employer, if you are a teacher, if you are a social worker, I mean, think within yourself, outside what you're getting paid to do, how can I help this person that I know? My cousin came home, or the young lady on the block, I see her walking around. Could I have a conversation with her? Is there anything, my job is hiring. Sometimes they don't even know. I can make a recommendation or let her know that if she come down, I will vet her to even get a little Christmas job or whatever. Try to be more, take our heads out of the clouds, take our eyes off the phones, and start opening our minds and our spirits to the communities that we find ourselves living in, because we never know, and tomorrow it may affect our own families. So I'm saying just be more aware. Just be more aware of what the realities of the negative situations, the cause of the negative situations are, and see within yourself, how can I make a contribution? I can't tell everybody because, again, like I say, it's not cookie cutter. But as we go along life, too many people, and I see it all the time, too many people in their phones, too many people not stopping to ask a person, can I help you? Too many people ready to make the judgment call, lock them up and throw away the key because they're evil or whatever it is. And if we could be, as a community, go back to it takes a village, that's not a cliche, that's a fact of life. If we could be more village people and be more aware of our environment and our neighbors and the people that we see passing every day, I'm certain that a lot of this could be reduced. We won't quell it. It won't go away totally, but a lot of this would be reduced. Men and women come home and they tell us, nobody in my neighborhood who talks to me. Nobody talks to people anymore. And, sometimes they say, I'm trying to just ask a question. And everybody's going so quickly, or everybody's in their phones. We can't even ask a question. But until I do something negative, then everybody comes. So we as a people, we just got to be more aware. Try to go back, like I said, become more village members rather than individuals who are so caught up with social media and modern technology.
Reconnect. Yes, absolutely. And where can people learn more about your organization and to support you?
We are located at 1425 Art Street. We are the Office of Reentry Partnerships.
Awesome. And is there because we're gonna close up this again, thank you so much for having this conversation.
Talking.
No, I really, really appreciate it. It's so important, and it's something that I feel very strongly about myself. While we were working on this series, we've covered a lot of mental health issues. We've talked about some societal issues.
That is big. That is really, really big.
Yes, and so and I'll say this: when we were looking for media, like we still even haven't nailed down. There isn't really media that is commentary on the incarceration system that isn't a documentary. Like we haven't been able to find fiction work that is really questioning that, except Wendell and Wild by Jordan Peele, the claymation that is pretty new, and that it swept under the radar, but actually surprisingly does talk about the incarceration system in this really digestible way. So I think we might end up covering that, but it really has been a challenge. I think other than those really big documentaries that we definitely value, there hasn't been a lot of discourse about it. And so I'm hoping that we, do see more information about that people do reconnect with their communities and also just stop to think, right? To just challenge what we've been told, challenge what we've been, told to think and expect of people, and really look at it. And I think once you do and you stop and you look and you just think, it all becomes very clear what the problem is, and it's really hard to defend a system like this. There's nothing that anyone could say that I'd be like, oh, of course we should have this. Like, there's no part of me that feels that way, and so, yeah. So I just really, really thank you. I think Asada as well, and your organization was able to, connect us with Tyree, so we have that interview as well. So.
Right.
Listeners, please check them out. Do the work, educate yourself, listen. We will be including a lot of different links and ways to support these different organizations so that they can continue doing the amazing work that they're doing, but that you can also learn what is going on. So thank you so much, Pam.
Before we go, I just want to give you a website also.
Oh, absolutely.
It's www.phila.gov/reentry. REENTRY. And one word that I'd like to give to everyone listening, think about it, Google it, research it, and that word is trauma. Every single one of us have been affected by trauma. And the justice system, people involved in the justice system have been traumatized. And if we could recognize what trauma is and start thinking about and meditating on that word, we will understand and probably relate to justice involved individuals and even to our own selves, because we would start doing a little bit more self-care for ourselves and the people around us. But think about the word trauma and how trauma is affecting society today.
That's so true. Yeah, trauma-informed care and trauma,
So much needed
the
here.
all of that is a big staple in what we do on our show too. Is really highlighting how it affects us mentally, how it affects like the choices that we make and the way that we interact with people and in the world. So absolutely, I agree with that. That's amazing advice, and you've been so informative and very helpful. So thankful to have you join us. But thank you so much, Pam.
I
And
appreciate being here. And if you need me again, please reach out. I'll be happy to continue this, this conversation because, like I said, it's much needed. And continue doing the good work that your organization is doing.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for watching and listening to the Ghouls Next Door on this special episode where we interviewed two folks doing work for those incarcerated and reentering. I hope that this was educational for you and that you enjoyed it. Please let us know what you think and tune in the new year for new content. And as always, don't get married. They'll eat your kids.